Hold someone's hand right now. Go ahead, do it. If you're alone, touch the table in front of you. Press your finger against it. Feel that? Feel the solid surface, the warmth of skin, or the coolness of wood? Here's what I need to tell you. You're not touching anything. You've never touched anything. Not the table, not another person's hand, not anything in your entire life. And I can prove it. I know that sounds insane. You can feel the table. You can feel another person's skin. The sensation is right there, undeniable, immediate. But that sensation, that feeling of contact, is a lie. A very convincing lie that your brain tells you, but a lie nonetheless. There is no contact. There never was. What you call touching is something else entirely, something far stranger than you ever imagined. And once you understand what's really happening, you'll never experience the world the same way again. Let me show you what I mean. Start with the basics. What is your hand made of? Atoms, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. About 7 octillion atoms. And what is the table made of? More atoms. Wood atoms if it's wood, metal atoms if it's metal. Now here's the question. When your hand gets close to the table, when you press down and feel that solid resistance, are the atoms in your hand touching the atoms in the table? That's what you think is happening, right? Atom meets atom. Physical contact. But no, that's not what happens. Not even close. Let's talk about what an atom actually is. You picture a solid ball, maybe. A tiny sphere of matter. That's wrong. An atom is mostly empty space. Mostly. The nucleus sits in the center, incredibly small. If you scaled an atom up to the size of a football stadium, the nucleus would be a pea sitting on the 50-yard line. That's it. One pea in an entire stadium. Everything else, the whole rest of the stadium, empty. The electrons are somewhere out there in that emptiness, not as particles sitting in specific places, but as clouds of probability, waves of possibility. They're not things. They're patterns spread out through space. So an atom is almost entirely nothing, a tiny dense core surrounded by vast emptiness with some fuzzy electron clouds floating around. Now when you touch something, when your hand gets close to an object, the atoms in your hand get close to the atoms in the object. And as they get close, something happens. The electron clouds start to interact, but they don't touch. They can't touch. Because electrons repel each other. Every electron has a negative charge, like charges repel. It's one of the fundamental laws of physics. Put 2 electrons near each other and they push apart. They can't occupy the same space, ever. This isn't just a tendency. This is absolute. There's a principle in quantum mechanics called the Pauli Exclusion Principle. It says that 2 electrons cannot be in the same quantum state at the same time. They can't overlap. They can't merge. They have to stay separate, always. So when the electrons in your hand get close to the electrons in the table, they repel. They push away from each other. Hard, extremely hard. The force is electromagnetic, one of the 4 fundamental forces of nature, and it's strong, very strong. The closer the electrons get, the harder they push. This repulsion grows enormous at tiny distances. By the time your hand is a fraction of a nanometer away from the table, the repulsive force is massive. Your hand can't get any closer. The electrons in your hand are pushing away from the electrons in the table with tremendous force. You feel that force as resistance. You interpret it as solidity. You call it touching, but there's no contact. Just forces acting across empty space. Think about what this means. Right now, if you're sitting in a chair, you're not touching the chair. The electrons in your body are hovering above the electrons in the chair, separated by a tiny gap, pushing away from each other with enormous electromagnetic force. That force holds you up. You feel it as the chair supporting you, but the chair isn't touching you. It's repelling you. Same thing with your feet on the floor. You're not standing on the floor. You're hovering a fraction of a nanometer above it, held up by electron repulsion. You've never touched the ground, not once in your life. Now wait, you might say, okay, but that gap is so small, it doesn't matter. A fraction of a nanometer? That's basically 0. We can call that touching. But no, it's not 0. It's not contact. And the gap isn't what matters. What matters is the mechanism. You think touching means atoms making contact, surfaces pressing together, matter meeting matter, but that never happens. What you're feeling is a force, an electromagnetic force, and forces don't require contact. In fact, contact doesn't exist, not in the way you think it does. Let me give you another way to see this. 2 magnets, hold them with opposite poles facing each other. They attract, they pull together. Now flip one around so the same poles face each other. They repel, they push apart. You can feel the repulsion, strong, definite, obvious. Now ask yourself, are the magnets touching? No, they're separated by air, by space, but you feel the force. That force is real. It acts across distance. The magnets don't need to touch to push each other. They interact through their magnetic fields. Those fields extend through space. The magnets feel each other's presence without contact. Your hand and the table are doing the same thing, except instead of magnetic fields, it's electromagnetic fields. The electrons in your hand create an electric field. The electrons in the table create an electric field. Those fields interact. When the fields get strong enough, the repulsion becomes powerful enough to stop your hand from moving moving closer. You feel that repulsion. You call it touching, but it's not. It's two sets of electrons pushing each other away through space. Action at a distance, no contact required. Here's where it gets even stranger. That gap between your hand and the table, that tiny fraction of a nanometer, it's not empty. It's full of fields, electric fields, electromagnetic fields, maybe even virtual particles popping in and out of existence according to quantum mechanics. Space at that scale is not nothing. It's seething with activity, with energy, with forces. So even if there's no matter in that gap, the gap itself is not empty. It's full of physics, and that physics is what you're feeling when you think you're touching something. Now let me tell you something that's going to make this personal. You've never touched anyone you love, not your parents, not your children, not your partner. Every hug, every kiss, every held hand, there was always a gap. Tiny, invisible, but real. The electrons in your skin and the electrons in their skin, they repelled each other. They never met. You felt warmth, maybe. You felt pressure, but not contact. The warmth came from infrared radiation. Photons traveling across that gap. The pressure came from electromagnetic repulsion, but you never touched them. Not really. This should disturb you. It disturbs me because we build our entire experience of the world on the assumption of contact. We feel things. We hold things. We think that makes them real, makes them solid, makes them present. But it's all force fields. It's all electrons pushing away from electrons. The solidity you feel is not matter meeting matter. It's repulsion. It's a force saying, no, you can't come closer. And your brain interprets that force as a surface, as an object, as something solid. But the solidity is not in the object. The solidity is in the force, and the force is not contact. It's the opposite of contact. It's keeping you away. Here's another thing. The reason you can't push your hand through the table is not because the table is solid. It's because the electromagnetic forces are so strong that the energy required to push through would be enormous. You'd have to overcome the electron repulsion, force electrons into the same space, violate the Pauli Exclusion Principle. That takes energy, huge amounts of energy, more energy than your muscles can provide. So the table stops your hand, not because it's solid, but because the forces are too strong. Change the forces, make them weaker, and suddenly you could push through. Matter would become ghostly, insubstantial, not because the atoms changed, but because the interactions changed. This is the truth about the physical world. Everything you think of as solid, as tangible, as real, is actually empty space held together by forces. Atoms are mostly nothing. The forces between atoms are invisible. Contact doesn't exist. What you experience as the physical world is a field of forces acting across voids. You are a cloud of forces. The table is a cloud of forces. When those clouds get close, they repel. And you interpret that repulsion as touching. But it's not. It's just forces, fields interacting, no contact, ever. So what does this mean? It means the world is not what it seems. It means solidity is an illusion. It means everything you've ever felt, every surface, every texture, every sensation of touch, was really just electromagnetic repulsion. Forces acting across distances. Your entire tactile experience of reality is a field phenomenon, not a contact phenomenon. There is no contact. There are only forces. I once held my daughter's hand when she was small. I felt her tiny fingers wrapped around mine. I thought I was touching her. I thought that contact was real, was meaningful, was a connection between us. Now I know better. There was a gap, always a gap. The electrons in my skin and the electrons in her skin, they pushed away from each other. They never met, but the force was there. The repulsion was there. And somehow, mysteriously, that force carried meaning. That repulsion felt like love. How? I don't know. But it did. And maybe that's enough. You've never touched anything, but you felt everything. The forces are real. The interactions are real. The electrons pushing away, the fields interacting, the repulsion building, that's all real. Contact might be an illusion, but the physics isn't. And maybe the illusion is what makes us human. Maybe the fact that we interpret force fields as touching, as holding, as connecting, maybe that's the miracle. Not that we touch, but that we feel. Not that atoms meet, but that forces matter. That's the truth. There is no contact. There are only forces. And you are made of forces, living in a universe of forces, experiencing forces, interpreting forces as reality. The table isn't solid. Your hand isn't solid. Nothing is solid. It's all forces, all the way down, and you've never touched anything. Not once, not ever. But somehow you felt everything.